today I just wanted to share on a meditation that I've really been affecting my mind and challenging some of the ways that I'm thinking and really bringing into light, almost like a street sign. So I don't know if anybody has taken the driver's test, the little written test. You know, you got a bunch of questions, and then half of them are signs. And so when you study for your driver's license, you study the book and all the rules and how many people know how far you have to park from a bridge, or what way do you have to point your steering wheel when you're parking uphill, or what's the most slipperiest time on a road, you know? And the answer for that one, just between you and me, the answer is right as it starts raining. The most slippery time of a driver. Probably black ice is in there too. But at any rate, half of the test is on signage. And so you really have to know the signage. So this meditation has really been a sign to me. It's been popping up. And I think that the Spirit of God, the Spirit of love, wants to warn me that I think a loving relationship with my God, with a father, is I think warnings. And so maybe we could all take this, and maybe that's the gift of this meditation, is just having that as a sign popping up whenever you need it. For me, signs are good. I know that I ran a treatment center for 9 years, and you got to have signage, but there's always that one guy that comes in the house, and then he has to make his own signs for everybody else. And so there was one guy in particular, and I think over the evening, you know, we wake up I come to work in the morning, people are waking up. There was literally like 40 more signs in the house. And so there was an uproar. People were going on strike. I'm not doing my chore. This guy's putting too many signs. So I think that's controlling, but we have a God of our understanding that is a God of love. So a sign here and there, I think, is a beautiful thing. So this is a meditation on the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get the text out of page 25. And I called it Middle of the Road Solution. And so I want to talk about what being in the middle of the road actually is, and then what is the causation that gets me there, and then what do I typically do about it. And I have a couple options that I can do. So I'll tell some stories in the book and give some examples of what that looks like. So where I would start is, if you are seriously alcoholic as we were, so basically there is no hope, physically, mentally. I have done every human effort that is possibly available to me. I have tried to quit on my own. I have tried to not drink wine when I drink beer, and when I drink beer, definitely don't drink the Jack. I've done every kind of combination. I've hidden my car keys. I've hidden my bank card. My car keys have actually been thrown in the backyard, not to be found until 2 days later. That kind of thing. I've put my own human effort, but then I've had other human effort. Going to jail for a few times. That is other people trying to help me change my behavior. I've been in psychiatric treatment and at the Royal Ottawa as a patient a couple times, taking anger management, taking all of these prescribed medications, if you will, to change my drinking, to change my addiction. And there was nothing that ever was able to stop that, because I have a physical and a mental problem. And the real problem that never goes away is this managerial problem that I have. I'm trying to manage my spiritual condition. And so that's what we're talking about here, as seriously alcoholic as we were. And you can fill in the blanks if you're a codependent, or food, or drugs, or whatever it is. Have you tried everything in a humanly possible? Have you tried everything that is available and found out that it didn't work? So that's who we're talking to. There is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life had become impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation at best we could. The other was to accept spiritual help. So there's two solutions here. One is go to the bitter end, and most of us will end up in a hospital. Most of us will end up in jail at some level, and others of us will actually pass away. This is a deadly disease which takes a lot of lives. And so the other option is to have spiritual help. And so it kind of doesn't give us many options. And so the middle of the road solution, what actually is that? So right before that, we have this great fact and the central fact. The great fact is that God will do for me what I can't do for myself. And the central fact is that God actually resides in me. I have a spiritual connection with a power greater than myself that separates me from alcohol and then goes about solving all of my problems, because the separation of the addiction is just the beginning. And so when I accept that solution, what I have come to understand is that I actually have a third alternative. And I call that middle of the road solution. So once I get some freedom, I can easily start what we would call it is resting on our laurels, or taking a break, or feeling sorry for ourselves, or having a little bit of self-pity or insecurity. We read about half measures will avail us nothing. That what comes to mind, and I've said this before, that the 98% isn't going to save me. It's the 2% that's going to kill me. And so that's where we get into this middle of the road solution. And how do I get there? I really truly believe that it's caused by fear. And so when I'm doing really well, I can take a break. I can go, well, I don't really need to be doing all of this prayer and meditation and having this relationship with God. I feel great, so I don't have to do these things anymore. And then all of a sudden something will pop up, and usually it's in the name of fear. And so the fear on the left side for me is that self-reliance will fail me. And the fear all of a sudden on the other side is a fear that God won't do his job. Or does God even really exist? And does God really even care about me? Which actually promotes me to even do his job even more. That if I don't take care of myself, then who else will? And now I am forced in the middle of the road, and the lines are coming at me, and there's traffic on both sides, and the horns are blazing because I'm in danger. And so when I have that feeling, that tension, the anxiety due to the fears around me, at some point, fear is the igniter of the mental obsession, which says, I need a break. I need to go drinking. But before I go drinking, it's going to introduce a third alternative. And so the third alternative is what I go for ease and comfort outside of my main addiction. We see this in the writer of the big book, one of the founders, where he is doing really well in recovery, and he's helping other alcoholics and their families and making a massive impact. And he's a businessman and a stockbroker, and he's back in business, and business is going well. And he goes to make a business deal, and it collapses. And what it says is the broker had gone to Akron on a business venture, which he had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might drink. And right here, he didn't have fear before the deal collapsed. He didn't have fear, while he was working. But when something collapsed, all of a sudden it provoked a fear. And now we get to see that I would suggest that he had a middle of the road solution in his business. And so the meditation is, what is my middle of the road solution? I might not be going to the drugs or the alcohol or whatever it was that I think was going to kill me. but what is the middle of the road solution for me? What is that third alternative that I go for ease and comfort? And so here's two questions that really will be a sign of these third alternatives. Number one is, what do I do that I want to stop but I can't? The other question is, what are the things I want to do but can't? What are the things I can't get done? These are a good example of a middle of the road solution to actually go that I'm actually being forced in the middle of this road by fear of self-reliance will fail me on this side and the fear that God won't do his job on the other side. And so I just wanted to do a reading in this context. On page 152 of the big book, it's just, I'm going to transcribe it into the third alternative perspective. And so this is just a sign for you, maybe a little sign that the spirit of love can go, if I'm going to these middle of the road solutions, then how far off am I, getting involved in my number one solution? So here we go. Am I like a little boy whistling in the dark to keep up my spirits? I fool myself inwardly. I would give anything to have a third choice that works and get away with it. I will presently try the old game again, for I am not happy about my sobriety. I could not picture life without the things on the list. I became unable to imagine life either with the things on my list or without them. I know loneliness such as few do. I was at the jumping off place. I was working for the end. We have shown how we got from out from under. You say, yes, I am willing, but I am to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some self-righteous people I see. I know I must get along without these things on my list and third alternatives, but how can I? Do you have a substitute that is sufficient so that I don't sit in the middle of the road and go to third alternatives? And so I believe that we do. And it's called the fellowship, and it's called the people with the common solution. We might have different problems, but we have one common solution, and that is our relationship with God. And I truly believe that part of our fellowship is sharing our recoveries with people that are fighting for their lives and in addiction. And that's our job as people with the solution. So ask yourself those questions. What are the things that I want to stop, but I can't? And then what are the things that I can't get done? I think the big book talks about the middle of the road solution, and it's almost like being trapped there. But how they refer to God is a broad and roomy highway. The spiritual life is actually a broad and roomy highway, which is kind of cool because there's a contrast in this, in my thinking of like, it's so hard to be in recovery. If it was so simple, why can't everybody do it? Like, I think it's like 3% of everybody that tries to quit doing alcohol and drugs, only 3% of them stay sober for the rest of their life. And you're trying to tell me that this is a broad and roomy highway? Like, a broad and roomy highway should be so easy to get onto. I believe it is, but fear is keeping us in this middle of the road, and we go to other solutions and we leave God out of our lives and out of our recovery. But the spiritual life is actually broad and roomy and high because of God's grace. And if anybody here has a sober date, if anybody here has been separated from alcohol or drugs or fill in the blank more than 24 hours, more than 48 hours, more than 2 weeks, more than a month, more than 2 months, 5 years, that's God's grace. He's doing for you what you could never do for yourself. And it's not an accident. But 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road, I still have to have and remain in conscious contact with the source of the power, or I will use. And I've seen more people use and relapse in the last year and a half of COVID because they were in the middle of the road solution, and then finally they can't take any more anxiety and tension within them, and they reach for the bottle or they reach for the drug. So here's the contrast. Just referring to the Gospel of Matthew. We read that the gate is narrow, the wide gate and the broad road leads to destruction, and many enter it. And I see that broad road. It's so easy for us to get in the middle of the road because we're surrounded by fear, but it's as small as the gate and narrow as the road that leads to life, and only few find it. Isn't that so true about our addiction community? So when they're talking about gate, I did some research on this, and they refer to this gate as the eye of a needle. They say the spiritual life is like going through, having a camel go through the eye of a needle. And you and me are thinking like, okay, I've seen a camel, like maybe not petted one, but I've seen one. They're pretty big, and I've seen a needle. And if you're like me, remember needles that were really easy, you could thread them. I found I was trying to thread a needle for like 10 minutes the other day. And I was like, I can't see properly. Imagine getting a camel through there. That's not even a good analogy. But what they're really referring to is they had the city, and the city had a big gate around it, and it was open for business. There was safety in the city. There was provisions in the city. There was food sales in the grocery stores. All of the things that you would need for survival were in the city. And many of us can relate to being in the desert, being outside of the city gates, and then we come in and it's closed. And we think, fear pops up. I'll never get in. No one wanted me in there in the first place. Well, I'm just going to look for a middle of the road solution and turn around. It wasn't that bad anyway. And I'll just watch a little of this and I'll do a little of that. It's not that big of a deal. But the reality is there's a little gate, and it's called the eye of the needle. And so they shut the big gate, but they had this little gate, and it was guarded. But you could fit in there one at a time. So what they had to do, what a traveler would have to do, would be unload their camel, unload all of their provisions. And so now the camel can go on his little knees. They do this. You can look it up. They go on their little knees and they creep through the gate, and they get into the gate. And that is what the recovery life is all about, is unpacking all of the stuff that makes it impossible to get into the broad and roomy highway. All of that stuff is I have to unload that to actually get into the gate to experience the broad and roomy highway. Because once I get through the gate with nothing on me, with all of my provisions, with everything that I'm holding on to, and the reason I hold on to these things is because of the fear of self-reliance will fail me, and the fear that God won't do his job. If I can let go of everything, I get to come into this city, the spiritual life, if you will, where there's safety, where there's provisions, where there's comfort, where there's joy, where there's all of these things in a community that now I finally have purpose. Now I have a brand new surrounding, a brand new life. And all I had to do was shed everything to get into it. And so I think that's the meditation is just what is keeping me on the outside. What are the things that I'm holding on to that won't allow me into that gate? What are the things that are blocking me from going into that gate? The resentment, the fear, the pride, the ego, the things that my addiction made me. In our recovery literature, it never talks about surrender, which is a fascinating thing. When you think about it, because when I think about addiction, I just got to surrender. Surrender. I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but I had a couple charges that were outstanding, and I was delivering some pizza one day, and I got pulled over, and the charges were on the Quebec side, and the officer kindly just asked me to wait, and they would bring up the charges, and somebody would come to pick me up, and I'm like, man, I got pizzas, I got 2 deliveries. I sat there for an hour, and they couldn't get anybody to come and get me, so they had to release me. I delivered the pizzas, got tips. I was an hour and a half late, and the reality is I didn't want to get pulled over in an unopportune moment, so I actually had to go surrender my rights. So in the concept of surrender, there's no real choice. The reality in the spiritual life, there's always a choice. That's what love is. It gives us a choice. It's consensual. And so the reality of the spiritual life, the broad and roomy highway, going through the eye of the needle, getting into this new town with the safety and the walls all around us, the reality is that I have to abandon. So change the word surrender to the word abandon. I have to abandon the middle of the road. I have to abandon the reasons that I'm there. I have to abandon the fears, and we have a process that we go through to be able to guide ourselves through that, so that I can actually bring those things and abandon myself, my ego, abandon everything for a whole new structure that I get to walk into. And so you might be, all I want to do in this meditation is give you a road sign so that the spirit of love can flash it up and go, hey, you're in the middle of the road. You have tension and anxiety, and you're going to things for ease and comfort, and it's not a safe place for you to be. Come and join us on the broad and roomy highway. But you're going to have to shed some baggage. You're going to have to shed some fear. You're going to have to shed some ego, some pride, some self-esteem. And I haven't abandoned you or forsaken you. I've actually given you the tools of inventory and a whole community of people to help you do that. We're not alone to take this burden off. That's why we have the fellowship. That's why we have the community. And God's given us the tools as a loving God for us to have our eyes open and for us to be awakened that we are actually in the middle of the road and we're going to get schmucked by traffic. We can't stay living in the middle of the road.